Welcome to Creating Flow, the podcast where I, Joni Francisco, hope to empower women, helpers, and healers to unblock their energy and unlock their power. We're tackling the tough reality that many in the healing professions today are sacrificing their well-being in the pursuit of helping others. Not only do I think this is just plain wrong, it ends up draining their vitality and diminishing their ability to serve. I've experienced this struggle firsthand and emerged with the insights and strategies to break this cycle. That's why each week we explore practical methods not only to replenish your energy, but also to cultivate abundance in your life. You'll get actionable steps to fill your cup first, ensuring that you can overflow with energy and serve others without burning out. Today's episode, I want to start by asking you a question. So let me ask you, are you getting enough sleep, but you still feel tired? Or are you acting like you are tired? And stick with me on this. There'll be more to come. Are you performing high-performance tasks at work, but everything else seems like a struggle? Do you make plans and goals and you just can't follow through no matter what? Today, we're going to dive into the possibility that this fatigue and procrastination is actually your nervous system trying to keep you safe. But first, if you like what you hear today, then I would highly suggest you joining the Abundance and Flow community on School. Not only are there free, awesome AF trainings on there, we're building a community of other helpers ready to have more abundance and flow in their lives. Let's journey together towards freedom in life, health, and business. The link to join is in the show notes, and I hope to see you there. So you have probably heard of fight or flight, but what is that really? Well, when we're faced with danger, our body kicks into drive, right? It's like you don't have time to think. So this autonomic nervous system kicks in. And when we kick into fight or flight, it's exactly what you would expect, right? You raise your heart rate, all your blood goes to your muscles and avoids everything else. So you're going to survive. You're going to fight or you're going to run away. Another thing we don't think about that, though, that perceived response doesn't have to be a tiger, right? It's just that proverbial you're being chased by a tiger. And in modern day, that looks more like overwork, not enough leisure time, not doing things that fuel your body can even cause that chronic stress. And the fight or flight, that's really getting pretty predominant in talk, especially as we have a lot more adrenal fatigue going on. And so the fight or flight has really came front and center. But there's the other piece of this autonomic nervous system that is called freeze. And again, this is that proverbial deer in the headlights, right? And so if you can't fight and you can't run, then the other option is to freeze and play dead. Fight or flight is really an outward expression of this, an outward response really of this safety, right? It's just you want to get to safety. Where freeze is an inward response, everything turns inward. And sometimes this is your initial response, that deer in the headlights. And then a split second later, the fight or flight kicks in, right? But if it doesn't, you may get stuck in that freeze. And that looks like at first, you still get that high heart rate, you get the rush of adrenaline, but then your body puts the brakes on. It's not safe. And so you just freeze. You can't move. You can't use your voice. You may not even be able to use any of your muscles. And you may even start to think about something completely different than the situation that's happening. If at this time you're unable to do something to release this energy, then this becomes stored in your body and your subconscious. And this is often true when you're in situations that are unsafe to actually move or say something. And freeze is really our mostly used childhood expression or response to fear or things that are unsafe. Because most of the time it isn't safe to run or to fight. And so freeze becomes our predominant response. And especially if you're in environments where that's happening recurrently, then freeze becomes the safest. And as we continue to use that as our coping skill or our safety response, that becomes maladaptive then as an adult response when you could have a different reaction, the fight or flight. Also, your perception becomes that a lot of things are threatening when really they might not be, and you still go into freeze. And now you kind of get a better idea of what that freeze responses, I just want to shed a little light about what trauma is, because a few things I see with clients, especially those that are serving and helping and healing with other people, is this comparison of trauma. And we want to compare our trauma to other people's trauma, and then we minimize our own response, right? Because we hear these stories, we see these other things, and they seem so much bigger that we shouldn't have a traumatic response to the thing that's happening to us. But traumas really don't work like that. We can't directly compare trauma to trauma, because it really depends on the state that you're in when you experience it. And this might be related to your past experiences, your past responses, your coping skills, your tools in your toolbox, and even just the kind of mindset you're in at the time. And these are just a few of the things that will indicate the response in a certain person at a certain time. There's many other things that will contribute to how traumatic the perceived threat feels. And that being said, another thing that often happens is that people don't even recognize things as trauma because we're moving in such a fast pace of life that we just quickly shove it down, or we don't even realize it's traumatic at the time because it hasn't been talked about. Other people don't relate that particular experience to trauma. And so your body doesn't really kick in that was trauma and that the freeze was a result of it. And in the end, having that big T trauma that is the lingo out there right now of things that are really bad to little T trauma, like a sneeze and a bad mood, your body might still hold on to that, and it might still have now appear as a threat to even sneeze, right? And so whether those two things happen, you now have this response because it's autonomic, right? It just happens in the blink of a second because our brain loves to be efficient, and it's just a reflex. It comes out to keep us safe, right? Well, what happens when you have chronic stress or chronic exposure to these triggers, right? These triggers could even just be things that are fiction, like TV, books, exposure to the news, other people's trauma, or even like this constant repetition of little things that are causing you to go into that freeze state without resolution of your own experience, right? And this has been studied, and it shows that the biomarkers actually react to these things in the books, TV, other people's stories as if they're happening to you directly at that time. And I want to go back a little bit just in that the piece, that word triggers. I think that's also become a really hype word right now. And so there's this invitation to really understand what that means. And for most of it, it means we feel something, right? And that's not safe for a lot of people. It's never been safe. This may have been due to the way they were raised, the people they were raised with, or in other relationships they've had. They didn't ever feel safe expressing their feelings. So that trigger then, of feeling something is unsafe. So then we kick into the being chased by the tiger or the freeze response in this case, like we're talking about today. And for others, it isn't safe because they don't know how to name the feelings. There's so many feelings between that I'm fine and I'm not fine, right? But many of us haven't learned how to express them or release them. And so they're stuck in your body, contributing to that feeling of a fear and being unsafe. And so then triggers or these experiences can build up within us and become triggered each time. We are then triggered again into that experience of being unsafe. And all of our experience will flood forward into how we responded and how we survived. And that's really just, again, the body's way of being efficient is to try to pull from all of those experiences we had and then solidify it into one shortcut. And for many of this, that becomes that freeze response. So when the freezing or the flop, so that's what happens after the freeze for a lot of people. If they don't move into what we were talking about earlier, the fight or flight, they will go into this nervous system state of being in the flop. So opposed to freeze, where it's still inward and everything is still on heightened, like your muscles are still clenched, you're just not moving, your heart rate is still elevated, then the flop is the opposite. You can't move because you have no energy to your muscles, right? No drive, but also you have apathy to the situation. And so when we begin to have experiences on this overworked nervous system, as I was just mentioning before, this often starts to look like procrastination, inability to start tasks, laziness, apathy, failure to stick to a plan. And, one of the lines you hear a lot is, I'll start tomorrow or I'll start Monday, and then tomorrow never comes, right? And Monday never happens and you're still stuck in the same pattern. You're feeling stuck. And now all these littler projects that may have not taken so much time or effort or energy, each time get bigger, each time you don't finish and resolve them. And so now the perceived barrier is much larger and you will initiate that freeze response much sooner. You might resonate with this a bit. So a lot of this I'm seeing in people today, it's that doom scroll that we talk about where you're just flipping through your socials, right? You're looking at your reels, your YouTube shorts, and you're just flipping through them. You're not even sometimes paying attention to the content or anything. You're just going to the next one. Or binging on streaming services, right? Like Netflix or something like that, where you just watch a ton of movies, even though you had this plan to do something else, like a big project or something on the weekend. Yeah. So have you been resonating with any of this and starting to connect some of those dots? It's good because bringing awareness is, the first step we really have to changing this, right? If we don't identify them as a nervous system response, such as the freeze, we may start to think of that as being lazy, right? We talked about that just a second ago, but being lazy, procrastinating, inability to complete tasks. And then we shove that into our judgment and our shame cycle, right? Like we should just be able to do that. What is wrong with me becomes the question. Why can't I just do that? And it's this narrative inside your head instead of, what am I feeling? What am I avoiding feeling? How is this unsafe? Why do I feel unsafe? How could I make myself feel safe, right? Those are all questions that would move you forward out of that versus into that cycle of not getting things done the way you want to, or starting to identify with procrastination and laziness and apathy, and then not being able to move forward out of that cycle. So, of course, we got to talk about how this interrupts our flow, right? Because we're all about creating flow and abundance here. And so we want to always bring that back in for you. And one thing I talk about a lot is the subconscious, right? And the subconscious really plays into this fight, flight, or freeze because it tells us if something is safe or unsafe, right? And so when we have goals, desires, growths, opportunities, this can often be sensed as dangerous to some people. You want to start a new exercise plan. You want to take on new clients. You want to start public speaking. You want to move to a new house. Those are just a few examples, right? But anytime you're going for more, anytime you're trying to up level, anytime you're trying to do new things, the subconscious kicks in, right? And it decides if it's safe or not. And a lot of those things will be deemed unsafe due to either past experience of that fear kicking in, or it's just change. And the subconscious really wants to keep us the same. And it would rather stay in the miserable than risk the unknown. And so that is perceived by our body, by our brain as being unsafe, and that we're being, again, chased by the tiger, right? Or we haven't even gotten, like our nervous system doesn't even allow us to be chased. So we're just frozen. We're just playing dead. So again, back to that, you could see how that's going to interrupt your progress, right? And interrupt the way you do new things, the way you achieve new goals. And the bigger the goals, the bigger the up level, the bigger the growth, the more that your nervous system is going to be on high alert. And the more you will see if freezing is your response, you will see more freezing, and it'll look more like those things that you loathe, right? It'll look like laziness. It'll look like procrastination, but it really is just your nervous system either dysregulated from years of the things that you've been doing to it or the experience. And so particularly for this to move through it, there's a lot of things, but I just want to give you 3 pretty basic things so that you can start to move out of this space. And really that first is the awareness, right? Like we always have to name it. So if we find the awareness and that curiosity to identify that, oh, yep, that's me. I think my nervous system is causing this, right? Instead of there is something wrong with you. This is my nervous system just trying to keep me safe. Oh, thanks, nervous system, for keeping me safe. And then your actions can change. You can move forward in a different way. And we have to look at this too in a holistic way. So really, when we have chronic freezing, we've really developed a identity within that in our mind and our body and our spirit. And so it'll be really looking into that and being curious as to where we can call in safety for ourselves. And that's the next step, right? That's safety. And what can you do to be safe? So there's a few things and tools that you can just use at home. So things like walking in a safe place is one of the best neural regulators that you can do. It feels very safe to our body. We're moving both sides of our body. We're moving our upper and lower extremities. And it's just a really rote task that helps bring us back into our body and feeling safe. Another thing is presencing. So when we do somatic work, that's one of the things we work on. And you just play witness to your senses that you are safe. And so you get into your body, you feel safe in your body, and then you witness your environment with your senses. Breath work, meditation, all of those things work to regulate the nervous system. And with them, you can add in that idea of being safe. So the third thing I want to talk about is healing this response, right? So changing it. And we can do things like energy work, Reiki, havening, EMDR, subconscious repatterning, parts work. And all of these should be done with a provider to begin with, because they can hold a very safe container for you. So you can get curious and feel safe in exploring maybe past experiences that were unsafe at the time, but now you are safe. So you can go through them in a different way. And you can feel safe and actually make it out to the outside of that experience to where you can look back and see what else is true. Another thing here about this healing response is when you notice that the phrase is coming. So paying witness to those other questions, right? Like, what am I really feeling? What am I avoiding feeling? And just journaling those. We do stream of conscious journaling. That's where you just write and you answer and you write and you answer and you try to think with any part of your body besides your brain. And so the brain might make it a little hard to look in on it. So we put on our curiosity hat. We try to think anywhere else and then just write and answer those kinds of questions. And in the end, this really takes practice and repetition of responding in a different way. So this is just, the tip of the iceberg, as they say, on this freeze response. But I hope it brings you into a place where you can delineate that difference between being lazy and tired and into that place of, this is just a response I have to keep me safe. And so if you're feeling that deer in the headlights, right? Or if you're calling yourself out for being lazy and too tired, or you're having procrastination and things in your business, you're doing really good in your rote tasks, the things that need to be done every day, they're not growth tasks, or binging on that Netflix, or you're doom scrolling, then I invite you again to get curious, right? Get curious so that you can look through a lens of, wow, this is my nervous system keeping me safe. And then you bypass that shame and that judgment, and you're able to really lean into those solutions and have the outcomes that you do desire, not the ones you do not desire. So I'll just thank you again for being here today. I so appreciate you listening, and I'm sending much love, and we will see you next week. So amazing. You've reached the end of another episode of Creating Flow, and I want you to know I appreciate your presence. And to remind you, knowledge is powerful, but taking action is transformative. I invite you to take the next step to activate your full potential today by scheduling a complimentary 15-minute session with me. A no-obligation chat to identify the messages your body is sending you and how I can not only help you understand these messages, but teach you how to heal your body in order to have an abundance of health and energy in your life and business. Visit the link in the show notes to book a call, and I'll see you next week.